Okay, Professor Kuma here. We're talking about the third major writing project of the semester. This is when I am trying to get you to analyze an issue, and we're going to be doing this in two formats. The first format will be in the essay format, so the traditional, the standard essay format, and I'm going to go over some of those things in this video on how to set that format up. Also in the essential elements of writing folder, you're going to see all the information that you should need in order to have to be able to format your essay correctly. Now, this essay does require at least one source, so one cited source from a reputable source. So while I do link a situation from Wikipedia in my assignment sheet, please don't use Wikipedia as a source. Don't use the dictionary as a source. We don't use sacred texts as a source. So don't use things like that as a source. What I'm looking for when it comes to that one source requirement is an article from a newspaper or magazine that is reputable, and or possibly you could use the VU online library to help you find those things. In order to cite those things, just take a look at the MLA citation information in the Essential Elements of Writing folder. I have linked Purdue OWL, so you can use that to find the citation information. On this assignment, I recommend you only use one source, but there's nothing wrong with using more. The reason I say just try to limit it to one, maybe two sources, is just because the whole point of this essay is to analyze an issue. So to analyze an issue, you could use multiple sources, absolutely, but you don't necessarily have to. So do what you got to do. You have to have at least one citation, okay, one cited source in this essay. Now, for this essay, the goal is to analyze an ethical dilemma within your industry. So this can be a lot of things. First of all, I gave you this example in the assignment sheet of a car company that is using cheap parts, and they know full well that that the parts it's going to cause problems. And this is an ethical dilemma because there are lives at stake, there are real people involved. It's also something that could cause financial problems for the company. So there's a whole ethical issue here of what is the right thing to do, and why is this even an ethical issue? So you need to be able to dive into this issue specifically and explain to your audience the facets of the issue. And by that I mean, basically, you need to assume that your audience is pretty unfamiliar with this issue, with this ethical dilemma, and we need to understand it better. Okay, your reader needs to understand this issue better. Now, you don't have to use the Toyota example that I gave. To be honest, and I shouldn't be telling you this because you're my friends at Subaru, but I was one of those unlucky people who bought a Volkswagen Jetta. And it was the diesel kind, and you may or may not be familiar with this. This is also something you could look up, but there was a defeat device that was put on these diesel cars that made the car seem as though it was not causing the amount of pollution that it actually was. So they were able to sell the car with and say, hey, the emissions are incredibly low, and they were able to compete with a lot of the hybrid cars and and say, hey, listen, we're very, very eco-minded. But the problem was that an enormous amount of these cars had defeat devices, so they actually were spewing. My car still they haven't come out with a fix for this problem yet, but so my car apparently is spewing out tons of toxins and things like that. Apparently it's still street legal, so I can drive it, but this was a real issue. This was an ethical dilemma. The reason why the car company did it was probably to save money, but I don't know a lot about it. That's why if I were going to write this paper, maybe the ethical dilemma would be the defeat device. Okay, a defeat device that might be placed on a car, and I would explain the issue as it happened within the context of Volkswagen. And I would explain why this is an ethical dilemma, what the problem is, why people do it, why it was done, and essentially the problems that can arise when this is done. Okay? That would be the essay. You could do this with other issues. For instance, perhaps there's a hiring practice that is an ethical dilemma. Maybe there's a depending on what criteria is looked at when it comes to hiring or firing, or wages. When it comes, and these are things that I want you to really think about, and these are things that you most likely have to deal with in your regular working job. What is a commonly used reason to fire or hire someone, and is this a good thing? Is this something that is an ethical problem? And if it is, you need to explain why it is. Why is this hiring practice an ethical problem? Why is this practice in automotive design an ethical issue? Basically, I want you to dive in deep and explain to your audience why this issue is an ethical issue. What are the issues that surround it? Give me the details. Explain it to me so that whenever I read it, so that whenever your audience reads it, they go from a state of not really understanding or not knowing about this issue to being able to understand the issue and the facets of the issue. Make no mistake, there are no really simple ethical dilemmas out there. If you find a two-dimensional ethical dilemma, it probably isn't that much of an ethical dilemma. Most of the time, it's more complicated than they just got greedy. I know we all we love to just to relegate the cause and effect. Well, they just got greedy. Well, oftentimes there's a lot more to it. It goes a lot deeper, and that's what I'm asking you to do in this essay. I'm asking you to dig deeper, explain everything you can possibly explain. That's why we call this analysis. It's critical analysis. We're taking this ethical dilemma, this issue, and we're critically analyzing it and explaining it to our audience. Okay? Now, how do we do this? Now, of course, take a look at the example and the information I put up on how to write an academic style college essay. But it's very, very simple, and it's it's a lot like the narrative essay we wrote earlier. The basic format of all college essays will always be the same. The basic format goes like this. We have an introduction. And remember, whenever we did the narrative essay, I did the upside down triangle because I was introducing the topic. Just the very basic topic. I'm not starting off with my argument. I'm not starting off with any details. I'm just starting off possibly with a story. Like, for instance, I might start off, if I were going to discuss the Volkswagen Jetta TDI defeat device, I might start with a personal story. I might start with, or I could, I won't start with a personal story. I'll give a different example. Maybe I might start off with just an introduction to the idea of smart cars and why people buy eco-friendly vehicles. It's a common place, if you will. It's something that many people already have a decent idea. Okay, green cars, ecology, the environment. That's something that most people are going to have somewhat of a working knowledge of. Also, you have to understand, most people drive cars, right? And right now, the majority of cars on the road are fueled by gasoline or diesel. There aren't a lot of electric cars out there. So the majority of people out there, even if they're driving an electric car, they didn't start on one, okay? So most people understand gas mileage, fuel economy. Most people have seen, especially here in the Midwest, most of us have seen trucks with the billows of smoke. You've seen semis. We understand that there's fossil fuels being burned. So maybe I might start off with finding out a little information about the first cars and their fuel economy. Or maybe I already know a lot of things about fuel economy. I might start off talking about, the Model A or the Model T got X number of miles per gallon, and I might go from there and talk about fuel economy until I get to the point where I'm talking about the not just fuel economy issue, but the issue of fossil fuels and how they affect the environment, and how most car companies are trying to focus on ways to get greener and greener cars. They want to be seen as eco-friendly. And maybe I would work my way down and talk about that, and then work my way to Volkswagen. While most car companies were talking about hybrids and electric options in their future, Volkswagen decided that it would focus more on its diesel option, which is very popular with Volkswagen in Europe, from what I understand. Again, I haven't done an enormous amount of research on this because I'm not writing this essay. You're writing this essay. You need to do the research so you understand your issue. But basically, you're going to start off from a place that most people are familiar with, and you're going to work your way to a thesis statement. Your thesis statement in this essay is simply going to state something that you're going to demonstrate in the body of your essay. Does this sound familiar? It should, because this is essentially what your narrative essay was all about. Instead of telling a story, a personal story, we're going to provide information in the body. We're going to provide critical analysis. The tone is going to be different because we're far more informative. We're not sitting around telling stories. We're in an information state, right? So we're just explaining things to a general audience. But the thesis statement is going to remain something that we're going to demonstrate the truth of. The essay itself will support that thesis statement. So you may possibly say something to the effect of your ethical dilemma, why it is an ethical dilemma. You might say, the Volkswagen defeat device poses a great threat to the reliability or consumer confidence in Volkswagen and other car companies, because it shows that they care more about their bottom line than they do about the honest marketing. Something to that effect. Why is this a dilemma? What makes this an ethical dilemma? You may say maybe you want to focus on certain, hiring. What kind of wage is a good wage to hire a new individual on the line or at whatever position you're hiring? Why is this an ethical dilemma? What is it about? Some people talk about the minimum wage. Now, I don't know if that is something that affects you at Subaru, but some people talk about, whether or not it's a good idea to raise the minimum wage or not, right? So that's an ethical dilemma. What's the right thing to do? What are the consequences? How deep does it go? So you need to distill this into a thesis statement, and that will be the last sentence of your introduction. And basically this statement will be what you support in your essay. Now, remember, for this essay, you're going to hand in a rough draft to the discussion board, and your friends and your colleagues will be able to see what you're doing. I want you to do the best you possibly can. And take a look at your friends and your colleagues' thesis statements and their rough drafts, and give them as much feedback as you can. Say, listen, I think you should probably change this, or take a look at what I was doing on my thesis statement. I'm pretty sure this is what we're going for. Thesis statements they're always in the third person. They're not in the first person. I believe this or that. No, it's always in the third person, and you're stating something that you're saying. You might say, raising the minimum wage is a major ethical dilemma because X, Y, and Z. Or using a defeat device with a diesel or any car, for that matter, to hide emissions is a major ethical dilemma because this, and this. okay? And then the rest of the body, the whole time in the body, you're going to explain the situation. Generally, the first part of your essay should just be informative. It should just say, listen, this is approximately what this situation is. Not just everybody is going to understand what a defeat device is, or what kind of dilemma is caused whenever we have cheap parts. And you're going to just give a kind of a general thing, and then you're going to give me more information, deeper and deeper, about the facets. How far does it go? You're going to critically analyze this ethical dilemma. Why is it an ethical dilemma? Who does it affect? In what way does this ethical dilemma affect these different groups? In what way would this ethical dilemma affect your company, or any company that does this, that has this issue, okay? Whenever you finish your essay, you're going to have a conclusion, and just like in the narrative essay, a good conclusion is a reflection of the introduction. So you might say, so while there are many issues that are in the car industry, and many car companies are trying to make greener and more fuel-efficient cars, there are many car companies that are not. Many car companies make a lot of claims, but they don't actually make any progress. They make excuses, or whatever it is that you want to say. And then you're going to restate your thesis statement, but in other words. You won't just copy and paste the thesis statement down here. You're going to have a sentence or two that pretty much says the same thing, but it's going to be in the conclusion. Just to remind your audience, again, this is the overall message that I'm trying to send you. Okay, so that is the first portion of this assignment, and it is the part that counts for the most points. You're going to be using at least one source in this essay, and a lot of times a person will find one really good source, something that is generally longer and more in-depth, that really significantly explains the issue itself, and that's great. Many times a person needs 2 or 3 sources. That's up to you. You just have to use one. That's the only requirement. You have to use one, and it needs to be cited appropriately. Again, please see the information in the folder titled Writing Essentials, and there's information on how to cite things in Mla format and how to do a works cited entry in Mla format. It's not hard. It just takes some time sometimes to look up, okay, what goes first, what goes second. Okay. Another thing is, just a real quick thing about Mla format, it just changed this year. Some of you guys have taken courses that used Mla format, I'm sure, in years past. If you learned Mla format really well, and you learned a previous version, maybe email me just to say, I'm having a little trouble. What is the difference between Mla 7 and Mla 8? We're on Mla 8 right now. For the most part, most things have not changed, but there's a few things that have. So please take a look at Purdue OWL and take a look at how to cite things appropriately there. And that's basically that first portion of the assignment. The second portion of the assignment is basically what you practice doing in your first 2 major writing processes or projects. You're going to take this long writing project, which is multiple pages long in essay format. So it's going to be the majority of your points, the majority of the work is going to go into this. And you're going to condense it into an inter-office memo where you convey the same basic information, but you're going to use memo format. So you won't have your introduction, you won't have your conclusion, you'll have essentially a brief description, and you're going to have those scannable paragraphs, very brief scannable paragraphs. It should not be very long. So those 2 things will be due together in one file. So the top part of your file will be in Word, in your Word document or your PDF, whichever you hand in. The top part is going to be the essay and the works cited portion. Then after that, we've got the memo. There's no length requirement for the memo. The shorter the better with your memo. Shorter the better. As with all memos, shorter the better. More scannable, the better. get to the point, move on, okay? So that is essentially this assignment, okay? We're really trying to break down this ethical dilemma. Why is it an ethical dilemma? What makes it an issue? And can you tell me all about this issue? Just all about it. And then you're going to break the same thing down in an MMO format. Okay, so take a look at the information in our essential writing essentials folder. And if you have any questions, let me know as soon as possible because this will be due relatively soon.